So stay in your seats as we bring up the wonderful and very fascinating storytelling that we're calling Mesmerizing Stories of Thrillers with Yossi Vardi, Tim Kring, and Gideon Raff. Mesmerizing Thrillers, Mysteries, and Miniseries. How do you write blockbuster stories for Hollywood?
Okay, first of all, on my left, right, on my left side. That's the left, yeah. I know you from somewhere. From where do I know you?
From age 0.
From age 0.
Yep. This doesn't work. Okay, there you are.
Yeah, now.
From my childhood. Yes.
Okay, an old fable says that in Hollywood, there are only 3 stories. The guy who came from nowhere and soared to the sun, the guy who got close to the sun and the
wings melted?
Yeah, his wings melted and he fell down. The guy who fell down and was redeemed and made it again. Is it true, Tim?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, for everybody who's succeeded in Hollywood, there's probably hundreds of thousands who never did.
Gidi?
Absolutely true, I think. We see the victims every day.
Yeah, how come the 2 of you, to which one of the stories you belong?
I think we're trying to avoid the sun.
Yeah?
Right? Too much, not too close.
Good. Tim, can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Well, it's kind of a long, that's a long, complicated question. I'm mainly a television producer, primarily known for television, mainly series television. But I've had a really long career of almost 30 years in Hollywood, and started writing back when there were only 4 places to sell a scripted show, and have seen it change now to over 60 places where a writer can sell a scripted show. So as you know, I've watched this transition from, how people consume content. I've watched that change drastically, but throughout all of it, storytelling still is the engine. It's the one constant in Hollywood is the need for storytellers. It's the engine that drives the whole thing. So no matter how it changes and grows and morphs into different platforms and different ways that people will consume content, storytellers are still vital to all of it.
Good. Gidi, can you tell us about your work a little bit?
Yeah. My work actually started in the high-tech industry. I wrote a book in Israel called Yomano Shel Startupist B'derech Lamaka.
What was the name of the company in the book?
To Seek. To Seek. It was a search engine. And It was a big hit in Israel, and a producer wanted to turn it into a sitcom, and
It
the
started
network-
as a page in Ma'ariv, I think, right?
Yes,
How
it
come you
started as
didn't
a-
make it to the biggest newspaper?
Yediot?
Yeah.
I don't know. It started with Ma'ariv actually asking me to do this. So we had a friend there. And then this producer took it to a network in Israel who claimed nobody's going to want to see a sitcom about an office. And a year later, The Office came out. But that was my first foray into television. And then I wrote a series called Chatufim, which, thank you, which I then adapted and turned into Homeland here in Hollywood. And then I did a series called Tyrant, and most recently co-created Dig with Tim.
Your first job in Hollywood, if I remember, was assistant producer, right? What was the nature of the work?
It was walking with the dog.
Which dog?
Not assistant producer,
No,
assistant to
to the director. Doug Lyman was his name. Is his name. He did Mr. and Mrs. Smith, where Brad and Angie met. Nothing. Anyway, it was picking up the shit and bringing him lunch, but it was.
Was it worthwhile experience?
Absolutely, the best thing, and the only way to start here.
Good. Tim, how did you start your quest into storytelling?
Whose shit did you pick?
Yeah, whose shit did I pick? I went to film school here, and I thought that I was going to be a cinematographer. That was what I was interested in. And then I got out of film school, graduate school, and I started working in production on, what's called pulling cables, setting up lights, all that kind of thing. Worked my way up to camera operator, and sometimes I would be the director of photography on various small music videos and that sort of thing. And a lot of my friends that I went to film school with had written scripts and were somehow, suddenly driving real cars and living in real places, and I was still, driving a crappy old car and working for hourly wage. And so I decided that I wanted to try to write a script, just like my friends had, who had gotten agents and that sort of thing. So I sat down and wrote a script, and then went on about 100 different meetings and pitch meetings, and ended up getting my first job writing for a show called Knight Rider, which was a show about a talking car.
A talking car.
Yeah, a talking car.
I heard about talking horses.
Like Mr. Ed, yeah. So yeah, that was my first job, and I remember when I got hired on a Tuesday, and they needed the script by the weekend, and I got a check for, it's a minimum amount of, in television you get paid, for an hour of television, whatever the Writers Guild minimum is, which was an unbelievable amount of money compared to what I was making at the time. And I just decided I had to figure out how to keep doing that. And so I never stopped working as a writer after that.
And somehow it worked.
Somehow I was able to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And for years I wrote, I had, my first television show was a show called Crossing Jordan on NBC. That was my own show that I created. And it was my 47th job, paying job as a writer. My latest show called Heroes Reborn, which was the sort of sequel to Heroes that Gideon and I worked on together, was my 51st job. And so it sort of shows you how much you have to, how many the dues you have to pay.
What is the one work you are most proud of? No, you.
I'm going to honestly say it's, you have to fool yourself every single time you do a job that this is the one that you are most proud of, because it's hard enough to do anyway, and you hope it's going to be the thing that people really respond to. To be really honest, I've written hundreds of hours of, while I've had, as I said, 51 jobs, I've actually written hundreds of scripts because some of those jobs were television shows that went for 100 seasons, 100 episodes. So I actually have had certain episodes of television within those that I found to be the most satisfying.
Why?
Usually because I was saying something at the time that I wanted to express to the world. I started thinking about a certain idea of a theme about interconnectivity and global consciousness, and I think that's where my show Heroes came from. It's where my show Touch came from. And so that theme...
So you have an embedded social message in your shows?
Yeah, and I think that's, to the extent that it's blatant or not, I think people absorb the message. In the show Heroes, we used the phrase "we are all connected." We used it exactly 100 times over the course of the show as kind of a mantra.
The show I'm most proud of?
Yeah.
Well, like Tim said, I'm proud of the volume of work and that I'm still working. But I think what happened with Chatufim, which was an Israeli show, but is now showing all over the world in Hebrew, in around 50 territories. And we sold the format of Chatufim. They're doing now a version of Chatufim, not Homeland, Chatufim, in Russia, in India, Brazil, Argentina, Turkey. It's the first show that South Korea is adapting. So I think starting from a very personal and local story in Israel and somehow reached heights that I didn't imagine it would.
You were surprised?
I was, absolutely.
And your parents?
My parents were absolutely surprised. They're
who is the Jewish mother in your family?
Oh, you know who the Jewish mother is in my family. But I will tell you that when I won the Emmy for Homeland, for writing Homeland, I got hundreds of texts from everybody in Israel and everybody in the States. Congratulations. And my parents didn't call, so I called my father. And I said, I just won an Emmy. Are you watching television? And he goes, shh. We're at the granddaughter's recital. They went to Mika's piano recital. So,
Tim, if you met Gideon's parents, you had a chance to meet them.
I have, yes.
Yeah. If you have to say something to them about their what we call in Hebrew tachshit. I don't know if you know what is tachshit, but what would you tell them
about their son?
Yeah, from your perspective, at the top of Hollywood.
Well, let's see. What would I tell them about Gideon?
They're not here. You can say whatever they want.
I could tell them you're gay.
Yeah, well, they know that. Believe me, we've been through that.
I'm sure there's nothing I could tell them that they didn't already know. He's a nice boy. How's that?
He is indeed. Is he talented?
Giddy is also not only one of the most talented, but one of the most fun people to work with, and that's been a big part of why I've enjoyed working with him. You do a lot of laughing.
That's good. Giddy, when you meet team mothers, what
you haven't met my mom yet, have you?
No.
You will.
What will you tell her?
Well, working with Tim kind of corrected my the way I thought of Hollywood, honestly. It's very rare to find somebody who has the success and talent like Tim, and yet is such a mensch and so generous and a real collaborator and amazing, really amazing.
He was in some abusive relationships before that.
And not only did we create a show together, which was amazing because we shot all over the world. We shot in Israel and we shot in Croatia and New Mexico and everywhere.
Canada.
But now Tim also invited me to direct a few episodes of Heroes Reborn, and I'm very, very thankful to Tim.
Tim, the Israeli movie and TV industry struggled maybe 57 years, 60 years until it had this amazing burst of talent, etc. How do you see the industry? How long you are watching the industry?
You mean the Israeli
The
industry?
Israel, yeah.
Well, I got a chance to when I went and did, we shot the pilot for Dig in Israel, and I got a chance to meet quite a few people in the television business there. With Avi Nir and his group, and it's kind of amazing just how creative and vibrant it is for such a small audience.
Guys, if you are not going to applaud, then all of us will fall asleep.
It really is incredible, the amount
Look
of
what
stuff.
he's saying. He's one of the biggest talent in Hollywood. He say these things about Israel, and you let it go over your head. Get out of we should stay here alone. You can also scream a little bit.
So
Okay, go ahead.
Wait, but
You say good things, we will give you good feedback.
The interesting thing was really about just how the sensibility, I think, is really really translatable to English-speaking audiences, and it's why Hollywood is really starting to look to the Israeli market as almost a incubator and a breeding ground for new ideas.
So why for 60 years we were not able...
it is really interesting that it took that long. We have a mutual agent, Rick Rosen from WME, who really, I think, has become instrumental in trying to cross that bridge. And the second that bridge opened in a real way, because of people like Avi Nir and Rick Rosen, it's now sort of a floodgate is sort of happening.
Good. Gidi, what is the movie or the TV that you really show or story that you really want to do?
That I want to do?
Yeah, your dream project.
I'm doing now a feature, actually. I'm doing a feature with Searchlight about how Israel got the Ethiopian Jews out of Sudan and into Israel.
Ah.
So I always wanted to tell that story. So.
You saw, that's a terrific story. You saw the documentary which was taken?
Yes, I saw that, and there was also a feature film, but I'm focusing on 1982 about the hotel that the Mossad bought.
Tim, you ever saw one of the most artistic and deep movies in Israel called Chagiga Basnooker?
No, I don't think so.
It's like Porky's.
Oh, okay.
Tim, what is your dream job?
As I said, it's kind of always the next one when you've had, you always try to put one foot in front of the other. I have a project now that I'm excited about because I think the timing is really interesting, and it's about man's first mission to Mars, and which I think is a very hot topic right now. And I'm also really interested in, having come from series television that goes on and on and on and on, I'm really loving this whole new idea of doing smaller, what they call limited series. It's the miniseries that was so popular, 20, 30 years ago. These are now becoming an actual viable, business for the studios to do. And it means that you can, in a world where there are 400 things on television to watch, how do you generate, enthusiasm without forcing people to invest, years of their life in something that they may get tired of? And so this idea of doing 10 or 12 episodes, making it an event, doing something really great, and then leaving, I think is actually really, an exciting way to tell a story.
That's interesting. You mentioned that instead of 4 potential customers, which were the big studios, you have now 60s.
Yeah.
Which are the big studios, the Netflix, etc.
Well, yeah. It used to be the main way to sell a scripted television show was in broadcast networks, and then you had some of the premium cables like HBO and Showtime, and now it seems like every other week there's some new channel popping up that is trying to get into the content business they found enough money to hire some writers and start a show. A cable company like AMC was a very small little cable company until The Sopranos and Mad Men and Breaking Bad, and they're worth billions more because of it. And so I think all of these companies are desperately trying to find their Breaking Bad or their Mad Men that's going to put their channel on the map. And
But what do you say about the attention? Today, people have about 7 seconds attention until they get bored.
That to me is the big problem right now with television. There was a lot of talk this year, for those of you who follow the television business, about an executive making this statement that there was finally too much content and that we were going to have somewhat of a bubble. And I have no idea whether that's true or not. I just know that personally there's a kind of stress factor now to feeling like you're missing out on things that people are talking about. It does feel like it's getting harder and harder to get people to log on to, there's a sea of noise, and how do you make noise when you're in a sea of noise?
Gidi, when you make a movie or a TV or a show, I don't know how to call it, who is the viewer that you see in your mind? Whom do you think is the viewer?
I actually don't think about the viewer in the beginning. I only think about the story itself, the characters in the story, and if I want to spend 2, 3, 4 years diving into that story. And hopefully, if it grasps me in a real way, and it's interesting enough for me in a real way to explore the story and to tell the characters' worlds, it'll grab somebody on the outside. I think if you think about your target audience to begin with, it might be a little paralyzing to write.
And where do you spend most of the time now, Gidi? Here or in Israel?
Well, this year I was in Israel a lot because we shot Dig there. At least we wanted to shoot most of the series, the whole series there, and we ended up just a few months because things heated up with Gaza. But I split my time between Tel Aviv and Los Angeles now and try to get to Israel as much as possible. I'm going next week.
To Israel?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And Tim, how often you come to Israel?
Well, for a while there we were going pretty often, but now my life is here, and so I'm not sure. I'm looking for a reason to go back again, so hopefully
you don't need a
something
reason,
with
you
Gideon.
just have to buy a ticket, you know. I will send you to El Al. You tell them that I sent you. They have now from Los Angeles a special, how you call it?
I wanted to come to Kindernet.
You want to come to Kindernet?
No,
I invite you every time, but you never come. 900.
I will go now to Kindernet.
Good. $900. You know, it's not a lot of money for such a successful. Good. Very good.
I think the thing that's interesting to talk about a little bit here, that because of the audience, is really just how is this idea of how it's changing, and how writers, I think, have to start thinking about how their stories can live on other platforms. Because
I have a question. How the stories can live now on other platforms? That's a good question.
Well, I think the marketing departments of every network and every cable premium cable company are really thinking outside the box now about how to reach an audience and treat it more like a world of the show, not just the show. We did a thing on Dig where we launched a pre-story on an application called Wattpad, which had 10 chapters, because it was a book, 10 chapters of these characters and the world of these characters before the show even started. And amazingly, it got to unbelievable numbers on Wattpad. And they also created a whole support system digitally to the show with clues and with games, and that really gave the audiences a unique experience.
I think the thing that you really want to do is you want to be where the audience is living, and The audience is living a lot on mobile devices. And so you want to be able to take your story and divide it up enough, hopefully have a story that has a deep enough mythology or a deep enough canon to the story to have some of it live over here and some of it live over here and some of it live over here. And then the deep fans, the fan mentality is usually driven by social currency. And the social currency that they have as a fan is their knowledge of the thing that they love. So if you give somebody an opportunity to know one more thing than the guy next to him, it's, that's a good thing, because you suddenly you're a better fan of the show than the guy next to you because you know one more thing. So I think it's, any show creator nowadays who's not thinking about how some of their story is going to live across multiple platforms is really missing a huge part of how the audience...
So when you write now, when you do a show, you have the option that the mobile device offering you in your mind while you are making it?
Some showrunners don't. I actually do. I like to think about how it's going to live in these multiple platforms. And if I don't, there's usually people that you bring on to the show who have that expertise. And then it certainly becomes a part of the marketing of it from the marketing divisions of these companies.
This is from business point of view or from the artistic point of view?
It's both. It's both. And I think it used to be that it was only purely marketing and promo that would drive these ancillary platforms. But I think people have begun to see, you take a show like The Walking Dead, and The Walking Dead has now a game, a mobile and tablet game, that has made, I'm not kidding, hundreds of millions of dollars. So the revenue stream that can now be generated from these kinds of ancillary markets is huge. And so the studios and networks are beginning to take this really seriously.
I want to go back to the question which I asked you, Gideon, regarding who is your viewer? Who is a viewer, and you say you don't care about the viewer. But we know that different demographics are using different platforms, that mobile is being used by people which are younger than you.
It's not that
10
I don't
or 15, 20 years.
It's not that I don't care. It's that when I write, I try not to think about it. When you're done writing and you start selling the project, that's when that comes up. And many times the networks and the other companies are trying to make the show a lot younger. That's a thing we hear all the time. And I think there's a little bit of confusion because all the executives now that I talk to are trying to figure out what Generation Z is liking. 20, I think the statistic is 20 out of the 20 of the stars of Generation Z, 19 of them are YouTube, and number 20 is Leonardo DiCaprio. And I think that's a new world that everybody's trying to understand how you cater to and how you monetize.
Do you understand?
This is it's a very, not dangerous, it's a very challenging problem for people like us who are working in a medium that usually requires, production value and crew that goes out and films it and actors that are actual real actors in the scripts. The Generation Z of 19 and younger, that generation would much rather get content sent to them by their friends than by any studio or content provider. So all we can hope for is that they're just going to get bored of that crappy content after a while.
Aren't you afraid that you will lose touch with what is interesting to them?
I absolutely am. That's the only reason I want to have kids, is to not lose touch with a target audience one day.
I have to say, the one thing that I've always sort of thought of myself, and this gets harder as you get older, I think, but you can really worry about that as a writer in Hollywood whether you have your finger on the pulse of what people really want. But I've always just used my own tastes as a barometer, you know, and my tastes are really varied enough. Sometimes on the weekend, if I go to a movie, I want to see a really dumb comedy, or I'm in the mood to see an action movie, or a big popcorn movie, or a sophisticated movie. So I've always felt that if I find that I like it, if I make it, when you say who do you make it for, I want to really be a big fan of my own stuff, and then I want my mom to like it. Those are the two things.
Gidi, many young Israelis are aspiring to come to Hollywood and to conquer the world. Some of them are doing it, some of them are left in the ditches. What is the advice you will give to a young Israeli who want to do it, to go to Hollywood?
Well, I think the only advice I can give is to work really hard. And like I said, when I got to Hollywood, I was in my 30s. I had a best-selling book in Israel, and I started from really the crappiest and the lowest job, and that's the only way to do it. That's the only way to rise in this industry. And also, you know, it's writing. The tip I always give is that I don't believe in waiting for a muse or an inspiration or anything. You have to sit your ass down in the chair and you have to write, and you have to treat it like a real job where you sit down at 8 o'clock and you break for lunch and then you come back and you write, even if it's just staring at a blank page. Once you do that, suddenly you can create yourself, you can create projects for yourself, and if anybody reads it and really loves it, you're in it. You're in the game.
Tim?
And then, of course, you need a lot of luck.
You need luck, yeah. I've answered this question before, and I know it sounds like
I cannot come with more creative questions, you know.
No.
I'm not creative guy. You are the creative guys.
So it's a bit of a glib answer, but inside the answer is actually a really truthful thing. And what I usually say is, the advice I give is to be nice to the guy who parks your car. And
That's a good one.
the reason is because that guy may be somebody who ends up being your boss, or someone who ends up being able to give your script to somebody who can get you an agent. And that's a real metaphor for how you need to think of your life when you come to Hollywood. It's a very interconnected business in a very interconnected world, and
Or he's just an asshole who'll scratch your car if you don't treat him nice.
Yossi, I know that we don't have much time for questions and answers from the audience, but I know that Yossi is dying to ask you a question, so go ahead.
I have no idea how you got Inigo Montoya into Homeland playing Saul and Hiro Nakamura. It's amazing. And you are amazing, by the way. You created unpredictable shows, which is really hard. There's so much crap out there. And I remember seeing Heroes for the first time. It was awesome. And, you know, for me, it's amazing. How do you feel about your stuff going out as artists in the Netflix format, where everything is dumped in one time? And
I love it.
I love it.
thank you. I just invested more stock. I just bought more stock. Thank you for validating it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I love it because, first of all, it's the way we do it in Israel. The way you have to shoot a show in Netflix means you have to write the whole show in advance. You shoot the show as one big thing, and then you edit the whole thing, and only then you can release it. That's how we do it in Israel. What it allows, by the way, is you save a lot of money. It attracts big casts because it's not such a long time to shoot it. And you tell a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. The scripts are already there. So there's no such thing as in episode 5, an executive comes to you and says, the audience likes him more than her, let's get rid of her. You tell the story you want to tell. I love it.
The week-to-week part of being on the air as a showrunner and a producer is really painful. It's hard to be judged every week. It's hard to worry about the ratings. That idea of the ratings are really a terrible pressure to live under. And psychologically, you've invested so much into these projects, but usually months before people were seeing them, right? So when you're airing week to week, it may have been 6 months between the time you directed and produced these and the audience is seeing it. And so that disconnect of where you are as a person and what you're thinking about, what you're caring about, it's like opening up an old wound sometimes. You don't want to, you're so past that. So the idea of having it all at once is a really, I think it's the perfect way to air these things.
It's also fun as a viewer. I mean, it's fun to binge view. It's fun to spend a weekend watching House of Cards.
I mean, listen, to be really honest, I've gotten to the point where I only try to invest in the process of making something and not in the result of what happens when it gets put out into the world. Because crazy making, that's a crazy way to think. When you're overly attached to what people are going to think about it. In some ways, the process of making it is so exciting and enjoyable and rewarding. I really wouldn't mind if we just made the show, then had a big bonfire and a celebration and burned it and nobody ever saw it. That would be perfectly fine with me.
Tim, in order to finish this very interesting discussion, I will go back to your social thing and I will ask you a tricky question. This city actually defined the American dream. And the interesting thing that the American dream was defined, I think, by 4 or 5 immigrants, like 100 years ago. Now you guys are defining the American dream. What is the American dream that you would like to define, if you can, in your work?
The American dream. It's gotten, it's gotten to be such a global world, and the American dream seems like a dream that available now, hopefully, to so many people around the world. And we're so interconnected. What happens here affects there so much that, I still, my own personal, I'm a one-issue candidate when it comes to what I want to talk about. And that is this idea that we are all somehow connected to one another, and what happens, what you do affects me, and what I do affects you. And that if we actually really embody that, we would know to take care of each other a little bit more. And to me, that partly is becoming and has to become almost by necessity what the American dream is, that we are global citizens and we have to shepherd, take care of each other.
Gidi, what is the Israeli dream that you would like?
The Israeli.
The Israeli dream that, if you can define it, how would you define it?
The Israeli dream? I think the word peace, for some reason, is no longer in the Israeli dictionary, but it should come back in a big way.
Tim, yes. Oti she'ela. This was a great moment to finish the interview, and you are killing it, but go ahead.
I want to know what your next project is, and should we invest in it?
My next project has nothing to do with business, and if you want to invest in it, I will be very happy, and the dividend will be in terms of satisfaction, not monetaries. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Kring, Gideon Raff.
Gentlemen, Yossi Vardi, Tim Kring, and Gideon Raff. Toda Yossi. May we take a little picture here with you? We have our handy photographer in 2 seconds. As well. This is great cartoonist. Thank you very much. Such a pleasure. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. This loves the Okay, toda, Yossi.